Okay. Hello, everyone. I wanted to record a quick episode. And the title is This is True Loneliness. And of course, it's a bold statement. But I have such a unique perception on this sentence right now that I feel it's important to share. So I guess I'll start from here, that I was thinking of the human being, and I was thinking of, I was looking at myself as one human being among 8 billion. As if every time I observe myself, it's as if I'm observing, a sample of the human species. Now, I was thinking about this sense of loneliness, and for a moment my attention, and just my whole moment's attention, went to this view that if what is here is beyond an object and subject, as I say in other talks, it was as if for a moment my mind was entertaining an animate intelligence behind my whole moment. So it was as if for a moment I was like, think of it this way, there is a loneliness, I'll say this, there's a loneliness in the outer realms in front of your eyes, which is based on your memory, and it is also based on how your intelligence uses the information it has to, in some sense, tell itself a story. So it's another way of saying, like, in front of your eyes, it's how you have accepted your own character's customization in accordance to your conditioning and just all the experiences you've been through, which suggests whether the person's integrated in society or not. But when I'm saying this is true loneliness, that's of the inner kind. And it was as if for a moment I was like, okay, I have all these humanized spectrums of reality and value, and just the priority of where the attention needs to be. But at the same time, for a moment I felt, how would I say it? It was as if I felt that my own mind is here and it's present, and beyond what I know, is there something else on the other side? In Sufi mysticism, just various mystics, they speak about this veil. And what it means is that you suddenly notice the edge of your known universe. Your known universe. That means it's as if there's, the edge of the outer universe, it's as far as the, our telescopes can see, and beyond. And it's also, and then in regards to the edge of the inner universe, that means all your conclusions on life's meaning and intelligence, it's like they're standing with you, and some part of you is going like, okay, what else? Now for me, that what else, for a moment animated in a way where it was as if for a second I was like, truth, are you here? As if you're in a dark room and you feel there's something else in the room, and then you ask the question, are you here? And it was as if for a moment I felt not a nihilistic, there is no meaning behind the scenes kind of view, but for a moment I felt a loneliness of the presence of my mind. This loneliness is not something that with even other physical bodies in the moment it could be satisfied. It's as if the mystery of one's own intelligence that is just like a sort of hidden secret yarning within them. For a moment I felt this loneliness that was unconditional. Okay, I remember I gave a talk, and it's one of the early talks, where I called it the orphans of existence. And so it's not what's in existence that is getting rid of this deeper sense of, let's say, the soul's loneliness, or I shouldn't say soul's loneliness, it's as if the mind's loneliness within the presence of attention. You see, again, the body There's other people, it's like it's not lonely. There's other factors of intelligence, known intelligence in the moment, the body's not lonely. But when it comes to the mind, it's as if a candle in a dark room where it can't see anything else but itself, wondering, okay, was there something else in the room that lit this candle? And you see, there is a conceptual understanding of the word God, and then there is an experiential understanding, which is another way of saying the psychology of an animal is attempting to touch the inconceivable, and in doing so, first recognizes a sort of, let's call it space automata. It's as if you find the edge of how your mind is being. You know what it is? It's kind of like, think of like a Castaway movie scenario, but it's not for the body. It's for, in some sense, the original presence of attention. I mean, honestly, this episode is inspired because I experienced this moment where for a second my mind put aside all the conditional factors, all the spectrums that relate to the meaning of a human being. For a second, it's as if my mind put that aside, and it was as if, hey, intelligent universe, are you here? Or another way of saying it is, it's as if I had a moment where I was asking the whole moment if its essence is there. You know, it's a sort of loneliness, I would say, of here's a bizarre concept. The concept of loneliness can apply to a temporary being, but it can also apply to an immortal being. Or even if we go deeper, to an eternal view, to an eternal viewer. It's as if like the ocean was alone, so it's as if it turned itself into rain. You know, for some reason, when I look at my own psychology, one of the most fascinating things that I would say was life-changing for me was the recognition of my mortality. So it's as if all this, it's like, think of it, a human being has micro sufferings and let's say macro sufferings. The micro sufferings are like mini imperfections in regards to how the intelligence is perceiving, the moment. And so it's as if this view that it's like it's gonna end, that this candle in this dark room, dark cosmos where the consciousness has been lit, it's as if this consciousness, the candle will melt. Like it's a perfect linking metaphor. As we live on this planet, as the human being gets older, it's like the candle's getting closer to the edge of it, edge of the wax. For the mind, it's like the continuity of its own appearance to itself. Like that's a purpose, I would say, of the mind. Now this awareness, this light in the room, upon the recognition of mortality, it becomes fearless in how it is. So when it comes to the psychology of the person, of thinking, okay, what's going to happen, let's say tomorrow, and then suddenly they reach a point where they're like, okay, there's going to come a point where there isn't going to be a tomorrow anymore, it's as if we're living for the future only to realize that there's a moment where we stop having access to it. And that's a source of strength, I would say, because it's as if, okay, all the significances of one's own psychology that were creating a sort of let's say again, a spectrum of suffering, they all go away in this realization that it will end. Right? That's the issue. We're conditioned in a way where it's as if our intelligence begins and it cannot accept that it's going to end. Right? The endings are, we assign it emotions of let's say, we assign fear. It's like when a child is born, people celebrate, you know. When a person dies, it's as if, you know, people cry. There's even this Cherokee saying, which is so metaphysical. I don't know if it's Cherokee or where it comes from, this saying. But the saying was that it went something like this, where it says when the child is born, the world laughs, like celebrates, and then the child cries. You know? And then the next part of the quote is like when the man dies, you know, it's as if the world cries, but the child laughs, the human being laughs. You know, it's a suggestion of you living your life in such a way where it wasn't that you had micro satisfactions and then the whole journey was rough, but rather you lived in a way that when you died, it wasn't just people, you know, it wasn't just people who were there. It's as if the world cried. That's the significance of that poem. But anyways, I went on a tangent. Pretty much this idea of mortality giving us an ability to be able to accept whatever is happening here now. When you really look at what is happening here now, you find your body, but then the way that you, like the human intelligence is knowing it has a body, is that it's actually being the whole awareness of the moment. Literally, the mind is being space, or the brain is creating some sort of recognition of space ability. And so this mind is being the whole space, and the body is in it. The body is a part of it. You see, right now, the same awareness I have to how I have a body is the same awareness I have as how thoughts come and go in my inner realms. It's as if it's like we are not the body. We are aware in it and as it changes. Okay? So anyways, a sort of existential, a sort of experiential loneliness when existence unifies into a singular moment. You know, so in some sense, physical loneliness does not compare, I would say, to the type of loneliness where a journeying attention in a realm has gone through literally the various dimensions accessible, only to recognize that this cause and effect game comes back to the cause. You see, it's as if somebody, you know, seeking truth or wanting to be the ultimate truth, and it's as if the moment they become that, there is nothing else to do. That nothing else, that feeling of nothing else to do, is true loneliness. You know, it's as if, you know, perhaps a prayer no human being of any, whether religious affiliation or not, has had, is that the person prayed for God to be happy. You see, that's such a next level view, rather than the ego or the identity seeking balance through whatever language use it has for its prayer. It's as if the prayer is not for the effect of reality, it is for its cause. And of course, what is prayer and meditation? Somebody said it best. Prayer is talking to the universe, like universal intelligence, and then meditation is listening to it. But anyways, the loneliness of the mystic is that the moment there is a self, the meaningless appears. But once the self accepts its nature as space, it's kind of like this true, let's say, transcendental loneliness I'm talking about, of how awareness is just here to itself without, let's say, a true knowing of its source. It's as if not only enlightened states are fascinating, unenlightened states are really fascinating. States where they are not bound by some sort of standard of perfection. You see, this is the coolest thing. I find it's honestly like a blessing and a privilege I can talk about these in this moment. Where to me, truth was never like a shirt that could fit everyone. Every person's truth is based on their ability. Their ability is based on how aware they are where their energy is coming from. That means even if there was someone who they had no spiritual notions or ideas, but they were just sitting in the park and just feeling how they were being energy and how that energy is arising. Right? I mean, of course, there is I sometimes can sense what's moving in my body. Like, you know, my cells, not like at the level of like that movie scene from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where like that dude at the end was like so conscious of his body, he was changing the direction of his, like, you know, the flow of his blood in his body, like not to that level, but there are moments where I suddenly feel I'm not a personality and I'm just a being. That even the human idea, it relates to the persona. But what it is that it's an unknown creature. We call it so many names, but it's just being something. You know, the nature of our desires transform the moment understanding brings in new dimensions to the context of how we're holding ideas in the moment. The inspiration behind this episode, I'll emphasize again, was that pretty much I had this moment where I'm like, God, are you here? And it was as if it was such a strange silence. You know, it's as if the anticipation of a temporary personality to discover an eternal cause, even though it's a system of understandings based on effects. You know, sometimes I think about what is a great life. Is a great life just service-oriented to materialism? Or could it be that rather than having this traditional spiritual perspective that Earth, you know, I've heard too many spiritual people say this, that Earth is a school, that we've come here, that it's not like a educational system that we have now. It's a school of an evolution of souls. And like even in Buddhism, it's like this view where those people who reincarnate in human life, it's as if they failed their ascension. But anyways, this view that it's a school is because it's infinite doesn't make sense to me. That it's as if we're here to infinitely learn. It's as if the spiritual person not only sees itself as like an eternal being, but an eternal being that is endlessly learning. It's as if like a bit of God becoming like God, throughout like a long, time span. But to me, it's more like beyond humanized spectrums of value. Not just spectrums, like hierarchies of significance, of importance. It's as if, to me, it feels that every conscious human being, aside from their, let's say, physical tasks of their environment, it's as if the main event of conscious life is not like a school. It's literally like you're at a party and you're waiting for the host during the lifetime. That means whatever amount of years you're alive, it's as if you need to see the host of the world. So imagine a group of people, sitting in this party room, and they're like, oh my God, whose party is this? It's like, how are we here? Whose house is this? Right? Whose grand, house is And then it's as if the host hasn't arrived. So now this idea is being taken to a point where it's as if the host of existence hasn't arrived. Now, what happens? Where I feel mysticism as one approach, and then I am, in some sense, kind of, taking a path less traveled by in regards to my own inclination. But in some sense, one way is that the person just politely sits their whole life waiting for the divine to approach them. Okay, it's as if you're waiting your whole life for the host of the universe. Now, another approach is that I would say the more mystical, I shouldn't say more mystical, it's like these are the approaches I'm seeing, right? So one, either the person's waiting for ultimate truth. The other is that the person realizes that they are that ultimate truth. Now this one's a bit tricky, Why? Because to become God to yourself, or to become the source of all reality, is it's like a subconscious disguise, even though it may be emotionally real, but it feels like a subconscious disguise of a solipsist. You see, it's as if one dimension started to rule all of it, give meaning to all the other dimensions, rather than each dimension being seen for its own value. And the only way, in some sense, the barks of dogma can be dodged like bullets in the Matrix by Neo, is in some sense an unknown presence is maintained, regardless of what known flux or known change occurs. You see, it's kind of like the temperature of the body. It's as if let's say a human being becomes emotional, like that's, there's certain psychological, turbulence there. But when a person is cold, let's say you're outside in your balcony and it's cold and you just come inside, it's as if the moment the temperature adjusts, it's as if the problem ceases to exist, Or it's another way of saying, if you think you're a person who has a relationship with divinity, the moment, it's as if the divine don't have the concept of divinity. It's as if God doesn't call itself God. Do you see what I'm saying? It's as if it's another way of saying, it's like people don't try to be human beings. They just are a human being. Right? What you are, there's no need for an effort to strive for. Right? Usually it's our psychological reaction to what we are not. Right? That means sometimes what motivates a person, it's not like, it's not always the past based. When I look at my life, it's as if, some of the most motivational moments was I was staring at an unknown probability and possibility and just attempted it. It's kind of like this. Maybe I could say it this way, where all the systems I've talked about integrate. So I'll say it this way. The body is like a participant I think the human body becomes incredibly healthy when it participates in a sense where it feels like changes, some sort of advancement is occurring in physical reality. When it comes to the mind, okay, let's say the mind is in a school, so all spiritual people feel happy. The mind is like a school, but the soul, it's as if the soul is not playing games of the mind and body poetically. You know, think of it this way, this metaphor I used in the previous talk, where I'm like, okay, the soul is the general. This is just for a manner of speech. The soul is the general, the mind is the commanding officer, and then the body is like the soldiers, right? Now, in war, what does the general do? The general stays back. The general watches the soldiers move and watches the commanding officers assist the soldiers. So when we open our eyes in the morning, our mind moves our body. Our subjective life inspires our objective life, you know? And there is complete communication between them. That means when a person's hungry, it's as if the soldier's going to the commanding officers and saying, hey, there's a problem. And the mind, the commanding officer, what does it do? It gives a command. So the person opens the fridge. Do you see? The body opens the fridge, right? Now, when it comes to the soul, the general is standing back. Just take this in. That the general is watching. If the soldiers fail, first of all, it's the commanding officer's responsibility that the soldiers don't fail. So it's in some sense the mind's responsibility to adjust its own body. So intellect is like it's like the first frontier. If this frontier is it's like the first level, right? It's as if how would I say it? If the commanding officer fails, if the mind cannot properly command the body and the body doesn't listen to the mind, this is where the general intervenes, right? So it's as if I'm saying, hey, everybody listening, think of it this way, that your body is on like the front lines of this transcendental battlefield. Your mind's behind your body, but it is commanding your body. Now, anytime the mind, where you can think of the notion of loneliness, it's as if the mind, outer realm loneliness, where it's as if the mind doesn't know what to command the body. And it's the same with people who they feel like, how would I say it? I think this is really the cure to shyness, that it's effort. It's just energetic expression. So in some sense, the commanding officer has to give a command. The mind has to decide, and then the moment it decides, there's freedom of expression there, right? Now, in a state of, let's say, loneliness, and I looked at a lot of quotes, not now, but in previous talks, like in quote tunnels, and a lot of people have this view. They give like a negative connotation to loneliness, and they give a positive connotation to solitude. So it's like solitude is acceptable loneliness, collectively acceptable loneliness. But anyways, it's as if that true loneliness that I'm speaking about is when the commanding officer, the mind that is moving this body, does not have a problem communicating to the soldiers. That means the mind's, let's say, communication signal to the body is like clear, like it's a good signal. Now, when the mind can't hear from the general, or it's as if, imagine in a battle, the general just leaves, right? For a second, the commanding officer has the burden of taking the whole battle upon itself. The commanding officers, plural. So imagine a battle where like the main source of command, because there's what do you call it? A chain of command. Usually systems and bigger movements, they do have a chain of command. Even in the art of war, Sun Tzu says that the general, that, of course, Sun Tzu's art of war is about deception, but pretty much in war, it's kind of like, because both armies are going to kill each other, so it's like deception's not as bad. you know. But Sun Tzu says that any, let's say, general that loses, or commanding officer that loses contact with his soldiers is defeated easily. That means once you create inner conflict, it's like a inner division, and then there comes an outer conquering, right? So now it's the same with the body and mind, I find. The mind and the body. Right now, it's as if this whole talk and the energy that I have, it's like an inner command, really. Or you can think of it, it's like I'm surfing a wave, but the wave is coming either way. So that loneliness where the mind does not have a problem, the mind is connected well with the body. The mind, for a second, can't say the general, which is another way of saying the mind is suddenly left with the responsibility of giving everything meaning. And I think many human beings don't have the capacity to do this, because if they did, you don't understand how intense it is. It's as if your inner realms are trying to fill out the meaning of everything they have ever seen, or everything that can be seen. You see, it's as if like that meaning is, unless you simplify it or you go to the realms of the inner observer, it's like it's overwhelming. You know? Like there's a level of meaning where we're like, okay, there's an object in front of me, let's call it a cup. Now it has a meaning, it has a, and of course, let's say the cup's designed with a utility, with being able to use this, having a value of its use, right? But when it comes to giving meaning to the vastness of all dimensions, as if we're trying to give meaning to a center of a circle where, so many different lines have extended from. Now, I have this feeling that the more technology intervenes in the future for future generations, they will experience not just loneliness. Right now, we're experiencing loneliness, but we're natural biological beings. When a human being in the future starts having artificial dimensions added to it, so imagine the great grandkids of, let's say, everybody who's alive now, future generations, it's as if these children will not only be born in artificial paradises, whether there's cyberspace found or some other means, their endurance, it's as if like let's say the human lifespan increases to let's say 1,000 years in the future, but that 1,000 years is not a natural 1,000 years. Even right now, one thing Sadhguru said that I liked, he said that a human being needs to know how to go gracefully, right, out of this realm. But there's a lot of interference from, let's say, pharmaceuticals or whatever. I'm just saying pretty much technology is man's, golden key of immortalization, So in the future, not only there would be let's say human beings that are starting to become artificial, imagine the person, okay, this might be a bit extreme, but imagine in the future, a person changed their arm and they got a robotic arm. Then they're like, well, oh my God, why do I have only robotic arms? I'm gonna get robotic legs. They got robotic legs, and slowly as that culture, let's say blindly went forth, it's as if the person eventually came to a point where we would just be brains and robots, and we'd still think to ourselves we're human. So it would eventually, that's really far in the future, if the species makes mistakes of not protecting this flickering flame of its naturalness, that level of loneliness where you're not just lost in cyberspace, and even though you can create any world, there is no meaning because the automated unknown nature is not moving in the background of the moment, right? And also you're artificial, so it's as if it would either it would be the most enlightening phase of human civilization, or it would be the most darkest and unnecessary interruption. You see, that's the thing where, what's the poet's name? Khalil Gibran. He says, if I remember his quote correctly, his poem correctly, there's a line where he says, the strongest souls are, okay, here, let me find it. It's a really incredible, like, poetic sentence. Let's go, Khalil Gibran. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. This is something Khalil Gibran, this poet, says. Right? So it could be that the more artificial the human being has, the more artificial obstacles it has, or the more it enters the artificial and has that kind of suffering, there may also come next level human beings who suddenly snap out of that cyberspace and have such a value for nature that it is beyond what we understand. Right now, me being alive and you being alive and us being like, oh, look at these beautiful plants and trees, would be nothing compared to imagine a child in the future trapped in cyberspace from birth and suddenly snaps out of it to suddenly experience the real sensation of its biological body touching a tree. You see, that reverence for nature surpasses even ours and even surpasses ancient traditions that pantheistic traditions that worship nature. Now, what should a human being do? So the body has to listen to, let's say, the instructions or the commands of one's own mind or their intelligence. Okay? The mind, which most people right now in 2022, you ask them, what are you? You know, they'll be like, I'm my mind, man. We don't know what the mind is, but we're so comfortable being it as a species. Okay? So people identify as, it's like, that person's like out of their mind. That person's in their mind. Oh, look, that person went back in their mind. It's as if that person's mind is a revolving door, Oh, man. The body must learn to listen, which is discipline, which even in the Hagakure, the book of the samurai, they speak about that. Like there's a huge emphasis on discipline. When it comes to the mind, it has to have trust, because nobody can give a command if they don't trust their own energy. That means if I don't trust myself, it's like, I'd start a talk and be like, oh no, and stop suddenly like trusting the process of just occurring as intelligence, right? As an intelligent expression. So that level, so I would say for the mind, it's command oriented. Now the mind, of course, you can think of it this way, as a server filled with various games. Right? The mind is so advanced, we don't even realize it. But let's say you look at let's say you grab a cup of water and you drink water, and most people will be like, yeah, in that moment the mind is having a memory of drinking water. No, the mind is seeing all the other possibilities. It's as if the moment you open the cupboard and you see all the cups there, it's as if your mind is visualizing, it's like instantly seeing as if like it's drinking throughout of all of them. So the mind is living multiple lives simultaneously, right? Now, and it's as if it's another way of saying the commanding officer is looking at various different events in the battlefield. Because if you think about battle, like old school battle where armies were fighting with swords and shields, right? It's as if those in the front line are pretty much brute force. Like, they don't need that much analytical power. They just need to defeat the opponent, just attack, just to be some force, right? But the commanding officer has to see the result, and then the general has to see the result of all the commanding officers. It's as if, like, poetically, your soul, if it was a general, and think of it this way, that every lifetime you've lived, and even parallel notions of lifetime. So it's as if you lived a lifetime as, let's say, let's say, just for example's sake, you lived like as a monk in one lifetime, but during that lifetime, you were experiencing parallel lifetimes in your inner realms, right? So it's as if the soul has multiple commanding officers, right? Every lifetime being its own command, its own response to reality, or realities, kind of. It's like yeah. So, and the stillness, the source of the general's knowing, this has been a private fascination of mine. There's some things when I think about what is connecting me to materialism, honestly, like, the concept of strategy is fascinating to me. Because a strategy is another way of saying you find access, right? Or an inner realm projection successfully stepped out into the outer realms, or it successfully happened. Because the way the existential game is set is that we're not here to have our minds 100% occur. Can you imagine a world where everybody's inner realm was happening? Imagine, like, somebody was let's say, okay, imagine a world where your imaginations could suddenly become real. So imagine there's somebody, this bus tour to Niagara Falls, and a bunch of people are watching, like, the Niagara Falls, and suddenly one person's like, oh man, how cool would it be if the water, instead of going down, went into the sky? So imagine you saw this, not a waterfall, you saw a water rise. The water was, like, instead of curving downwards, was just curving upwards towards the atmosphere, And now, if you had that visualization, suddenly everybody looking at the Niagara Falls would suddenly see that manifest, right? And in some sense, it's unnecessary. So there is a reason every person's mind is like private. Because if it was public, it would be out of control. Just if you thought about 8 billion inner realms actualizing in the outer realms. So we have to select to some degree, or at least generalize enough our perception so that we can appreciate the specifics of other dimensions. The fascination of why the soul has given, or how the mind has the command of the soul. This notion could be something like this, that when a human being is born, it's as if, okay, so people have this view that the soul is in the body 24/7 when in the waking state. But it could be that the soul just gave a command to the commanding officer, and the general's like attending some other matters. And then the mind is living this realm's life, But anyways, back to this notion of true loneliness. I think there is, in any moment of change, there's 100% something to learn. And the Buddha said something very fascinating. The Buddha said the nature of objects is they're empty. That means if a person, I'll just finish that, and the mind, the human's attention to the object inputs the meaning in there, right? So it's as if this is just an object, but when I look at it, it's a cup. You see, it's a glass cup. It's as if that language is seen, or like the symbolism is just put into the object simultaneously through the mind, right? But if you bring this to the level of people, and you have this, let's say, Buddhic observation that the nature of objective phenomena is that it's empty. So it would be as if you look at a human being, and if they do nothing, they are empty. The moment they do something, It's as if the mind puts the meaning there. So similarly, when it comes to our life, there is no finding meaning. It's as if the mind needs to put the meaning there. Now the issue is the mind doesn't know what type of meaning to put into it. So there has been like the challenges and suffering of, let's say, the ego. But here's the thing, that if the mind trusts in the space where the ego's happening, do you see? Or let's say the ego trusts the space where it's existing, and let's say the inner unknown viewer begins identifying with the space where the ego's moving rather than the ego. Then through an inseparability of the whole moment and your mind and the stillness of the body, of just how the body's there in the moment. How would I tell you? It's as if when you are still and watching how you're an object and subject, the commands of the mind automatically arrive. It's as if we need buffering time. This whole time, intelligence is about there's a buffering time to it. And in stillness and silent meditation, it's as if that buffering time, even, how would I say it? It's as if when a person sits down to meditate for 10 to 20 minutes. And when I say meditate, this is what I mean. I mean, you just find a moment throughout your day. It doesn't matter where you are, really. I recommend in nature, so there's natural imagery to see. But it doesn't matter where you are. You just stop and sit down for 10 minutes, and there is no something you have to do. There's just watching. You're just watching how experience is existing. You're just watching the moment. And you'll be fascinated how you suddenly start becoming conscious of how before you act, in the inner realms, there's an actor, there's a movement. It's as if in stillness, the inner life becomes viewable. But in movement, it's as if the inner life and outer life are conflicted or confused. It's as if the attention is so in the outer life that the inner life is being ignored. And it's strange, because if we had the truth from the beginning, there would be nothing to do. More and more as the days go by, I'm just realizing it's like truth has to be the unknown if we're identifying with knowledge. And we're temporary. So it's as if knowledge has temporary value and awareness has timeless value. I have been humbled. I've had states of mind I've talked about in other episodes where there was a moment where I was in this very unique state of mind, a bit shamanic state of mind, and suddenly I felt this presence. You see, I'm not a person who I see oh my God, is that an angel, on the top of that car? I don't see, my mind doesn't, it's not fascinated by seeing just an inner realm personalization, a personality, personification of something, What to me is that there's a feeling. So it's this emotional, I feel I don't know, I think there's 100% other people who probably are like this too. But to me, I feel like a presence in the room. When I say presence, I'm not talking about an entity. I'm talking about as if something in the moment has changed and there is an intensity signal arising from somewhere in the moment. Now that intensity signal, I had this, you can say, kind of like very unique experience where I suddenly felt like my soul, like a general, just appear, and my mind and my body, just for a second, they did not freeze, I didn't become a statue, but it was as if my mind was super humbly just there waiting, as if how in the military they salute and then the person's like at ease, and then their salutes go down. It was as if like that, where it was a moment for me where I felt my mind was saluting the presence, how the unknown presence was in the moment. And when the unknown presence gave that sort of at ease vibe, then there was just this sense of free being. You see, sometimes this is kind of strange, but it could be that when we're a multidimensional being, we're seeking actually a multidimensional presence. But if we are just doing it in regards to language and the domain of psychology, like the personality of the individual or the mask they wear, their persona, it's as if that part of you that takes its mask off. Right now, if you're listening to me and you think I'm good or bad, a good speaker, a bad speaker, or whatever, that's the mask. That's the mask that you're wearing in this moment that is choosing it. Now I'm saying, imagine experiencing a moment where the commanding officer just tells the soldiers to be, in some sense, stop moving. The mind silences the body automatically because the presence of the beyond has arrived. And when I say the beyond, that means it's a trust in not just what's in space, not just form. It is the trust of what more than form there is in the moment, which comes to space. Sometimes when I give these talks, I feel that the future will see my blind spots. And these blind spots are going to be opportunities for so many different eyes to journey through. So what I mean by this is that it's kind of like every human being or the human species is designed to explore reality in the outer realms physically. In the inner realms, your exploration is consciousness of what is already happening. That means in order to consciously live, not only physical dimensions have to be in view, but it's how, like the poet Rumi says, you have to work as hard as you work in the visible, you have to work in the invisible. Which is from a religious view, you would see that as faith. Unconditional faith. Not conditional faith. It's as if something is, somebody says the right words and you're like, I love this. I have complete faith in this. And then the moment changes, it's like the conditional faith breaks down. To me, it's as if we are question marks. And the moment we experientially wonder about what is looking through and within our eyes, that is when the question mark turns into an exclamation point. There's just so many dimensions to the moment. Even this morning, I was in my balcony. I recorded for the first time ever like a YouTube short. And I was just looking at this building and I was like, this building, if like my mind was for a moment visualizing like buses flying around between the buildings, I was looking out from my balcony. Just buses and just different cars. It's like my mind could visualize like an actual bus passing my balcony, right? And for a moment I thought it's as if it's like flying cars would be illegal or should be illegal until all buildings have some sort of, shield or force field around them. I even think in the future buildings will, it's hilarious. Right now we are wearing masks, like in 2022 with the whole corona thing, but it's as if like in the future generations the buildings will be wearing masks, which is another way of saying that imagine around every skyscraper in the future there's going to be some sort of giant glass dash energy dome or some sort of glass barrier, and it's as if it could be snowing outside but somebody's in their balcony and the air conditioning is not just in the building, is over the whole building. So the whole building is like in this glass, it's pretty much you put a giant cup on a skyscraper. Inside the giant cup is a completely different temperature than outside. So in the coldest winters, people, in those buildings will go outside, and from the distance of like the glass shield of the building, and then like let's say their balcony or the building, it's as if it's like it's regular temperature. And you know what it is? I have this feeling that there has to something, of course, again I'm saying a feeling, that I don't know why, but I think in the next 50 years there has to be some genius discoveries of new technologies of energy. There has to be. Or there will be just this slow nostalgia for the future. We're living at an incredible time. We're living at the fringes of nature's transformation into conscious created realities. And after the lifetime, after the battle, the soldiers are released. The mind, the commanding officer, salutes and thanks all those, honors all the moments of creation and destruction throughout the lifetime. It's as if the mind thanks the body for its service. And then the mind, it's as if like the general thanks the mind for its service. And in some sense, it's as if the relationship of a body, mind, soul turns into the relationship of a soul, of a conceivable, of an inconceivable attractor of the conceivable. And so it's as if the soul just smiles, as if victory was there from the beginning. The presence of energy. If it cannot be created or destroyed, fear is the illusion. Death is the illusion. If right now we are truly energetic beings, that means consciousness is like an extension of energy, like raw state of energy, right? Or it's as if energy has some relationship with consciousness, and therefore the attributes we give energy, it's like they follow for consciousness. Sometimes I feel, and I'm still here in this realm, but I would say I feel that the host, or let's say even for the soul, I was talking about the general kind of commanding officer soldier thing, but you can think of it this way, that the body is a guest and like a young child, and the mind is a guest like an older child, and the soul is like the oldest child, and God is like the father, that they haven't seen. Right? The younger child is oblivious. Matter is as if oblivious to its source. The mind, the middle child, is aware that it's like it can see the father. The mind can access divinity, let's say. But the father comes and talks, let's say, to the oldest son. Right? Has the deep conversations with the oldest son. Right? Until the others are of age, of course. But it's like with the oldest son, like the deepest conversations are. Now, that's like the soul and this notion of God, which is another way of saying Atman having a relationship with Parabrahman in the Vedic sense. So it's as if the soul of the individual has a relationship with the soul of the collective, but the soul of the collective is inconceivable. So and the soul of the individual is conceivable only to itself. And the moment it accepts the inconceivable, it's as if all karma is released. It's as if karma evaporated before destiny could wash its face. Alive we are. And each moment harbors its own gift. Beyond endings, the beginnings no longer need to lie. We are in a living world, and therefore on that level, as long as intelligence is present as a field, what loneliness? You know, even though I'm saying there's this deep loneliness, but on beyond humanized ties, beyond individualism, it's as if there's no more truth or false games. Being can be unconditional, free. Or better yet, better way I can say it is freedom is unconditionally being. I hope this episode was helpful. Thank you for listening, and namaste. Real eyes, I'll say this before I end actually, to trust, to have your body trust the mind, and to have the mind trust the general, and to have the general trust itself. All simulations complete. Peace was always there. Namaste.